The Council feared human emotion, then they witnessed human revenge. Commander Grace Callan stood at the viewport of the research vessel Prometheus, watching the twin suns of the Kepler system cast their orange glow across the asteroid field. Her team had been studying mineral deposits here for 3 months, completely unaware that they were being watched. "Commander, I'm picking up some unusual readings," called out Dr. Sakura Morimoto from his station. The young xenogeologist's fingers danced across his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "There's something metallic embedded in asteroid K-47, but the composition doesn't match anything in our database." Grace moved to his station, her boots clicking against the metal deck. At 42, she had seen enough strange phenomena in deep space to know when something didn't belong. "Show me the scans." The holographic display revealed a sleek, crystalline structure buried deep within the asteroid. It pulsed with a faint blue energy that seemed almost alive. "That's not natural," whispered Dr. Lila Voss, the team's xenobiologist. She had joined them at the display, her green eyes wide with curiosity. "The energy signature is too organized, too purposeful." "Could be a derelict ship," suggested Lieutenant Finn O'Reilly, their security officer. The red-haired Irishman had his hand instinctively resting on his sidearm. "Maybe we should—" His words were cut off as the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. The bridge lights dimmed to emergency red as something massive dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of them. "What the hell is that?" Finn breathed. The vessel before them was unlike anything in human records. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Prometheus, with a hull that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Strange geometric patterns crawled across its surface, pulsing with the same blue energy they had detected in the asteroid. "Commander," came the voice of their pilot, Lieutenant Devon Cross from the helm. "We're being scanned. Whatever that thing is, it's taking a very close look at us." Before Grace could respond, the main screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was humanoid, but clearly alien. Pale blue skin, large black eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom, and features that were too perfect, too symmetrical to be natural. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Prometheus," the being spoke, its voice melodious yet somehow cold. "I am High Counselor Veltar of the Ethereal Collective. You have discovered something that does not belong to you." Grace stepped forward, keeping her expression neutral despite the tension crackling through the bridge. "I'm Commander Callan. We're conducting scientific research in unclaimed space. We have every right to be here." Veltar's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those black eyes. "Rights are a concept your species seems fond of. However, the artifact you have discovered is property of the Collective. It was placed here for safekeeping, not for primitive species to stumble upon." "Primitive," Sakura muttered under his breath, his hands clenching into fists. The alien continued as if it hadn't heard. "You will surrender the artifact and any data you have collected. In return, we will allow you to leave this system unharmed." Grace felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "We haven't removed anything from the asteroid. We were simply studying it. If you want to discuss ownership, we can contact the Galactic Trade Commission and—" "Your emotional responses are disturbing," Veltar interrupted, tilting its head slightly. "Anger, defiance, pride. These base reactions have no place in civilized discourse. The Collective has observed your species for some time, Commander Callan. Your emotional volatility makes you unpredictable and dangerous." Dr. Voss stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. "You've been watching us? For how long?" "Long enough to understand that humans are fundamentally flawed," Veltar replied. "Your capacity for emotional extremes has led to countless wars, destroyed civilizations, and brought suffering across your small corner of the galaxy. The Council of Species has taken note." "The Council of Species?" Grace asked, though something cold was forming in her stomach. "A collective of advanced civilizations dedicated to maintaining order in the galaxy," Veltar explained with the tone of a teacher addressing a slow student. "We have determined that humanity's emotional nature poses a threat to galactic stability. Therefore, we have made a decision." The screen split, showing multiple ships decloaking around the Prometheus. Dozens of the sleek, mercury-like vessels surrounded them, their weapons already charging. You have 48 hours to evacuate your colonies and return to your home system, Veltar announced. All human expansion beyond the Sol system will cease immediately. You will remain quarantined until such time as you evolve beyond your emotional limitations. You can't be serious, Grace said, her voice hardening. There are millions of humans on those colonies. They've been established for decades. We are talking about preventing a galactic catastrophe, Veltar cut her off. Your species' tendency toward emotional decision-making, particularly what you call revenge, makes you a clear and present danger. This is not negotiable. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Commander, Devon called from the helm, his voice tight with controlled anger. They're jamming our communications. We can't warn Earth or the colonies. Grace stared at the blank screen, her mind racing. Around her, she could feel the emotions of her crew. Anger, fear, determination. The very emotions the ethereals claimed made them dangerous. Options, she said quietly. We could try to run, Finn suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it would work. Maybe if we can get far enough away from their jamming field. There are dozens of them, Sakura pointed out, his earlier anger replaced by grim calculation. Even if we could outrun them, they'll just follow us home. What about the artifact? Dr. Voss asked. If it's so important to them, maybe we can use it as leverage. Grace turned back to the viewport, watching the alien ships maintain their perfect formation around them. Everything about the ethereal spoke of cold logic, mathematical precision, emotionless calculation. They saw human emotion as a weakness, a flaw to be contained. They were about to learn how wrong they were. We're going to get that artifact, she said finally. All of it. Commander, Sakura looked confused. How does that help us? Even if we could extract it, we're still outnumbered and outgunned. Grace turned to face her crew, and they saw something in her eyes that made them straighten unconsciously. It wasn't anger, though anger was there. It wasn't fear, though fear was present too. It was something deeper, something that had driven humanity from caves to the stars. They think our emotions make us weak, she said softly. They think we're dangerous because we feel too much. But they've made one critical error in their calculations. What's that? Devon asked. They don't understand what human emotion actually is, Grace replied. They see anger and think violence. They see fear and think cowardice. They see love and think weakness. But they don't see the truth that human emotion is our greatest strength. She moved to the center of the bridge, her presence commanding the attention of every person present. Anger doesn't make us violent. It makes us protective of what we love. Fear doesn't make us cowards. It makes us cautious enough to survive. And love. She paused, looking at each of her crew members in turn. Love makes us willing to do impossible things for each other. So, what's the plan? Finn asked, and there was something new in his voice. Not just determination, but belief. We're going to give them exactly what they're afraid of, Grace said. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten something humans care about. Sakura, I need you to figure out how to extract that artifact. Lila, study the energy signatures. I want to know what it does. Devon, plot a course that keeps us near the asteroid but ready to move fast. Finn. She turned to her security officer, and her smile was sharp as a blade. Finn, I need you to help me prepare a very special message for our new friends. 4 hours later, the mining drones returned from asteroid K-47 carrying their precious cargo. The artifact was smaller than expected, a crystalline structure about the size of a person, pulsing with that same hypnotic blue energy. But as soon as it was brought aboard, the ship's sensors began detecting strange readings. Commander, Dr. Voss called out, her voice filled with excitement and concern. You need to see this. The artifact, it's not just technology, it's responding to us. Grace hurried to the laboratory where they had secured the crystal. As she approached, the blue light grew brighter, and she could swear she felt something touching the edges of her mind. It's some kind of neural interface, Sakura explained, his instruments dancing with data. But not like anything we've seen before. It seems to be reading us, our thoughts, our emotions. Reading us how? Grace asked. I think it's designed to enhance emotional resonance, Dr. Voss said, her scientific excitement overriding caution. Look at these readings. It's amplifying neural activity in the limbic system, the emotional centers of the brain. A weapon? Finn asked. Or a tool, Grace said thoughtfully. Either way, it explains why the ethereals want it back so badly. They can't use it themselves. Because they don't have emotions, Sakura realized. They've evolved beyond them, or suppressed them. This artifact requires something they don't have. But we do, Grace said, placing her hand on the crystal's surface. The moment her skin made contact, the world exploded with sensation. She could feel the emotions of her crew, not just their current feelings, but the depth of their commitment, their loyalty, their shared determination to protect humanity. Beyond that, she sensed something else, echoes of other emotions, older ones, stored somehow within the crystal itself. She saw flashes of another species, ancient beings who had faced extinction, and poured their final hopes and dreams into this crystalline memory. They had been like humans, emotional, passionate, driven by love and loss and the fierce desire to protect their own. And they had been destroyed by the very beings who now threatened humanity. Commander, Devon's voice cut through her vision, pulling her back to the present. We've got incoming transmissions. The ethereals are hailing us. Grace removed her hand from the crystal, but she could still feel its power humming through her. Put them through. Veltar's perfect face appeared on the screen again, but this time there was something different in those black eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the first hint of fear. You have taken the artifact, the ethereal said. This is unwise, Commander Callan. That technology is beyond your understanding and extremely dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Grace asked calmly. To us or to you? Return it immediately, and we will consider reducing your quarantine period from indefinite to merely 1,000 years. Grace felt the crystal's influence still flowing through her, connecting her to her crew, amplifying their shared resolve. She could sense their emotions, anger at the threat to their people, determination to fight back, and underneath it all, love for each other and for humanity itself. I have a counter-proposal, she said. Leave our space immediately. Abandon your plans for quarantine, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. Veltar's expression didn't change, but something flickered across the neural pathways visible beneath its translucent skin. You cannot be serious. You are one small ship with 5 crew members. We have a fleet of 40 vessels, each capable of destroying worlds. Yes, Grace agreed. But you've made one crucial mistake in your calculations. And what is that? Grace smiled, and there was something in that expression that made the ancient alien lean back slightly. You threatened our families. The transmission ended, and Grace turned to her crew. The crystal's power was still flowing through her, and she could feel their emotions as clearly as her own. Sakura's brilliant analytical mind was already working on the problem. Devon's steady determination was like a rock she could anchor herself to. Finn's protective instincts were sharpening into something dangerous, and Dr. Voss's compassionate nature was hardening into fierce resolve. What now, Commander? Finn asked. Now we show them what human emotion really looks like when it's focused, she replied. Sakura, can you interface with the artifact more directly? I think so, he said, though his voice was uncertain. But Commander, the power levels, if I'm reading this correctly, this thing could amplify emotions across interstellar distances. The potential for what? For showing every human in the galaxy what's happening here? For letting them feel what we're feeling right now? Grace's voice was calm, but underneath it was something that made her crew straighten with anticipation. That's not possible, Dr. Voss said. The energy requirements alone would be... The artifact isn't just technology, Grace interrupted. It's something else. Something the previous species built when they were facing extinction. They poured their emotions, their memories, their very souls into it. And now it's responding to ours. She moved back to the crystal, and this time when she placed her hands on its surface, she didn't just connect with it. She opened herself to it completely. The sensation was overwhelming. Through the crystal, she could feel the emotions of every human within 100 light years. The miners on Kepler Station, confused and afraid as alien ships surrounded their home. the farmers on New Eden gathering their children close as unknown vessels appeared in their skies. The researchers on Titan Base desperately trying to send warning messages that were being blocked by alien jammers. And beyond them, further out, she could sense Earth itself. Billions of human minds suddenly aware that something was terribly wrong. "Commander," Devon's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The ethereal ships, they're moving into attack formation." Through the crystal, Grace could feel Veltar's confusion and growing alarm as the artifact's power began to manifest. The ethereal had expected compliance or destruction. It had not expected this. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Grace said, her voice carrying new harmonics from the crystal's influence. "I want every human in the galaxy to hear this." The message that went out was not just words. Carried by the artifact's power, it was pure emotion, the depth of human feeling that the ethereals feared so much. Every person who heard it felt what Grace felt: love for their species, determination to protect their homes, and beneath it all, the cold fury of a people who had been threatened by beings that saw them as nothing more than animals to be caged. But more than that, they felt each other. For the first time in human history, the entire species was connected by shared emotion, linked by the very trait their enemies thought made them weak. The response was immediate and devastating. On every human world, in every station and ship and colony, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the stars with the same expression. It wasn't anger, though anger was there. It wasn't hatred, though they had cause for that too. It was the look of a species that had been pushed too far. Within hours, every human military vessel in the galaxy was moving toward the Kepler system, not because they had been ordered to, but because they could feel their people's need. Ships that had been exploring the Outer Rim changed course without waiting for authorization. Colony defense fleets abandoned their posts to join the gathering storm. Even civilian vessels, traders, explorers, researchers armed themselves and joined the converging armada. The ethereals, watching their sensors as hundreds, then thousands of human ships approached, began to understand that they had made a terrible miscalculation. "This is impossible," Veltar transmitted to the Prometheus, and for the first time, there was emotion in its voice. Fear. "Your species lacks the coordination for this kind of response. You have no central government, no unified command structure." "No," Grace agreed, still connected to the crystal and through it to every human in the galaxy. "We have something better. We have each other." The ethereal fleet, so confident in their technological superiority, suddenly found themselves outnumbered 50 to 1, and as more human ships continued to arrive, that ratio kept growing. "You don't understand," Veltar said, its perfect composure beginning to crack. "The Council of Species will not allow this. Other civilizations will intervene to prevent human expansion." "Will they?" Grace asked. Through the crystal, she was already sensing other minds, alien ones, scattered across the galaxy. The Zephyrians, an avian species that prized freedom above all else, were feeling the echo of human determination and nodding in approval. The crystalline collective, beings of pure thought, were fascinated by the emotional resonance the artifact was generating. Even some of the Council species were beginning to question whether the ethereals had the right to make this decision for the galaxy. "You see," Grace continued, "you made the same mistake that bullies always make. You assumed that because we feel things deeply, we're weak. But human emotion isn't just about individual feelings. It's about connection. It's about caring so much for others that you're willing to fight impossible odds to protect them." The first human ships had reached the edge of the Kepler system. Admiral Rebecca Stone's voice crackled across all frequencies. "This is the Earth Defense Fleet. Any alien vessel threatening human civilians has 30 seconds to withdraw or face the consequences." "This is madness," Veltar said, but its voice was losing the cold certainty it had possessed before. "Your emotions make you unpredictable, dangerous. This is exactly why the Council voted for containment." "No," Grace replied, and now her voice carried the weight of an entire species behind it. "This is exactly why you were wrong." She gestured to the view screen, where the approaching human fleet filled the stars like a constellation of anger and love and fierce protectiveness. "You see chaos. We see family. You see dangerous unpredictability. We see people willing to drop everything to help strangers they've never met. You see emotional weakness. We see the strength to care about something bigger than ourselves. The crystal pulsed brighter, and suddenly Veltar could feel what Grace felt. The connections between every human in the fleet. The way their individual emotions combined into something greater than the sum of its parts. Love for their families, determination to protect their homes, loyalty to their species, and yes, anger at those who would threaten what they held dear. But underneath it all, something the ethereal had never experienced: hope. The absolute, unshakable belief that together, they could overcome any challenge. Impossible, Veltar whispered, its perfect features showing confusion for the first time. Emotion should make you weak, divided. How does it make you stronger? Because real strength isn't about suppressing what you feel, Grace said gently. It's about choosing what to do with those feelings. You were right about one thing. Human emotions can be dangerous. When we love something enough, we'll fight to the death to protect it. When we're angry enough, we'll move mountains to set things right. And when we're determined enough. She gestured to the thousands of ships now surrounding the ethereal fleet. We'll cross the galaxy to stand together. Veltar looked at its own ships, so perfectly coordinated, so logically arranged, so utterly outnumbered by beings it had thought were chaotic and primitive. The Council will not accept this. Then maybe it's time for a new council. Admiral Stone's voice came across the communications array. One that includes species that actually understand what strength means. The standoff lasted for 3 days. More human ships continued to arrive, but so did vessels from other species. Some came to support the ethereals, convinced that human emotion posed a galactic threat. Others came to observe, curious about this species that could coordinate across such vast distances without central command. But many came to support humanity. The Zephyrians arrived first, their elegant bird-like ships taking positions alongside the human fleet. Any species willing to cross the galaxy for family deserves respect, their commander transmitted. The Crystalline Collective came next, their geometric vessels humming with harmonic frequencies that somehow resonated with the artifact's power. We have studied your emotional patterns, their spokesperson announced. They are not chaotic. They are complex. There is beauty in complexity. Even some of the council species began to waver. The hegemony, proud warriors who respected strength in any form, declared that humanity had proven its worthiness through unity rather than conquest. The archivists, ancient keepers of galactic knowledge, pointed out that every great civilization had been driven by passion as much as logic. On the third day, as the opposing fleets faced each other across the Kepler system, Veltar made one final transmission to the Prometheus. "You have made your point, Commander Callan," the ethereal said, and there was something new in its voice. Not quite emotion, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. But what happens now? Your species remains dangerous. Your capacity for revenge has been demonstrated, Grace interrupted. But so has our capacity for restraint. We could have attacked your ships the moment our fleet arrived. We could have destroyed your vessels and scattered your crews across space. Instead, we're talking. She stood before the crystal, its power still flowing through her, still connecting her to every human in the galaxy. But now she realized it was connecting her to something else as well, the lingering memories of the species that had created it. The beings who made this artifact, she said softly, they were like us, weren't they? They felt deeply, loved fiercely, and when threatened, they fought with everything they had. Veltar was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was barely above a whisper. They were unsuitable for galactic civilization. Their emotional nature made them aggressive, unpredictable. The Council had no choice but to act. "You destroyed them," Grace said, and it wasn't a question. They would not accept containment. They chose to fight rather than submit to logical authority. And yet, Grace said, gesturing to the crystal, they managed to create something that you, with all your logic and advanced technology, cannot understand or replicate. Something that requires the very emotions you despise. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Not just her decision, but the choice of an entire species. "Here's what's going to happen," she announced, her voice carrying across every communication channel in the system. Humanity will not be contained. We will not accept quarantine. We will continue to explore, to grow, to feel, and to protect what we love. And if the council objects, Veltar asked. Grace smiled, and in that expression was everything the ethereals feared about human emotion. Determination, protective fury, and the absolute certainty of someone who would not back down. Then they'll discover exactly how dangerous human emotion can be when it's properly motivated. The silence that followed was broken by Admiral Stone's voice. All human vessels, stand ready. If the ethereals want a demonstration of human unpredictability, we're prepared to give them one. But before anyone could move, another voice cut across the communications array. It was different from Veltar's, older, carrying an authority that made everyone listen. This is High Arbiter Quendal of the Galactic Council, the voice announced. All vessels will stand down immediately. This situation requires reconsideration. The ship that appeared was massive, dwarfing even the largest human vessels. It was clearly ancient, its hull bearing the scars of millennia, but it radiated power and authority. Commander Callan, the new voice continued, you and a representative team will transfer to the Council vessel immediately. It is time for humanity to have its voice heard. Grace looked at her crew, feeling their emotions through the crystal's connection. Determination, loyalty, and beneath it all, trust in her judgment. Understood, she replied. We're on our way. As the shuttle carrying Grace and her team approached the Council ship, she reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. Humanity had gone from an unknown species facing quarantine to the center of a galactic crisis, all because someone had underestimated the power of human emotion. The Council chamber was unlike anything she had ever seen. Representatives from dozens of species sat in a vast circular amphitheater, their forms ranging from barely humanoid to completely alien. At the center was High Arbiter Quendal, a being of shifting energy that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Commander Callan, the Arbiter's voice resonated through the chamber. You have created quite a situation. The Ethereal Collective claims that humanity poses a threat to galactic stability due to your species' emotional nature. Yet your recent actions suggest remarkable restraint and coordination. Please, explain. Grace stepped forward, still feeling the crystal's power flowing through her, connecting her not just to her fellow humans, but to something deeper, the fundamental truth of what her species represented. Your Honor, she began, the Ethereals believe that emotion equals chaos. They see our capacity for anger, fear, love, and yes, revenge, as signs of a primitive, dangerous species, but they're wrong. She gestured to her crew, to the images of the human fleet visible on the chamber's screens. Human emotion isn't our weakness, it's our strength. When we love something, we protect it. When we're angry, we fight injustice. When we're afraid, we become cautious and clever. And when we're threatened, she paused, letting her words sink in. We become unstoppable. Yet you threaten violence, Veltar interjected from its position among the council members. Your fleet surrounds our vessels with weapons charged. How is this not proof of your dangerous nature? Because, Grace replied calmly, we haven't fired. Despite your threats to our colonies, your plans to imprison our entire species, we chose to talk instead of fight. That's not the action of a chaotic, uncontrolled species. That's the choice of beings who understand that strength must be tempered with wisdom. High Arbiter Quendal's energy form shifted, and Grace could sense something like curiosity emanating from the ancient being. The artifact you carry, the Arbiter said, we have sensed its activation. It was created by the Vorthak, a species the Council dealt with millennia ago. How did you manage to interface with their technology? Grace felt a chill run down her spine. The Vorthak, the beings whose memories she had touched through the crystal. The species that had been destroyed for being too emotional, too unpredictable. They were like us, she said quietly. They felt deeply, loved fiercely, and when threatened, they fought back. You destroyed them because you were afraid of what they represented. They were dangerous, Veltar said, but its voice lacked conviction. Their emotional nature made them unstable, aggressive. Their emotional nature made them free, Grace interrupted. Free to choose their own path, to make their own mistakes, to love and lose and try again. You couldn't control them, so you eliminated them. The chamber fell silent. Around the amphitheater, representatives from dozens of species watched and waited. Finally, High Arbiter Quendal spoke. The Vorthak were a difficult case. Their refusal to accept council authority led to unfortunate consequences. But that was long ago, and perhaps mistakes were made. And now you want to make the same mistake with humanity, Grace said, but we won't let you. You would fight the entire council? Another representative asked, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like music. If necessary, Grace replied without hesitation, but we'd prefer not to. We came to the stars to explore, to learn, to find our place among the galactic community. We never wanted conflict, but we also won't accept imprisonment. She moved to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. I have a proposal, she announced. Give humanity a chance to prove that emotion doesn't equal chaos. Let us show you that our feelings make us stronger, not weaker. Grant us full membership in the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. And if you prove to be as dangerous as the Ethereals claim, the Arbiter asked. Grace smiled, and in that expression was everything that made humanity unique. Hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that they could rise to meet any challenge. Then you'll have the right to say, I told you so, but I don't think you'll get the chance. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members supported the Ethereals, convinced that human emotion posed an existential threat. Others argued that diversity of thought and feeling was essential for galactic growth. Still, others remained undecided, waiting to see which way the winds would blow. Finally, High Arbiter Quendal called for quiet. The council has deliberated, the ancient being announced. By a margin of 1 vote, we have decided to grant humanity provisional membership in the galactic community. You will be monitored closely, and any sign of the aggression the Ethereals fear will result in immediate containment measures. Relief flooded through Grace, and through the crystal's connection, she felt the joy of every human in the galaxy. However, the Arbiter continued, there are conditions. The artifact you carry, it must remain under Council supervision. Its power is too great to be left unmonitored. Grace's hand moved protectively toward the crystal. Through its connection, she could still feel the memories of the Vorthak, their final desperate hope that, someday, another species would understand what they had tried to preserve. The artifact stays with us, she said firmly. It was created by beings like us, for beings like us. We'll use it responsibly, but we won't give up the one thing that connects us as a species. That is not acceptable, Veltar said, rising from its seat. The artifact amplifies emotional resonance across interstellar distances. In human hands, it could destabilize entire sectors. In the right hands, Grace corrected, it could bring species together like never before. The Vorthak weren't trying to create a weapon, they were trying to preserve something beautiful. The ability to truly understand each other, to share not just words, but feelings. She turned to address the entire council. You've spent millennia trying to create order through logic and control, but real unity doesn't come from suppressing differences. It comes from understanding them. The artifact doesn't make us more dangerous. It makes us more connected. To demonstrate her point, she reached out with the crystal's power, carefully, gently sharing just a fraction of what she felt with the assembled council members. Not the full intensity of human emotion, but just a taste. The love she felt for her crew, the determination to protect her people, the hope for a better future. The reaction was immediate and varied. Some council members recoiled from the unfamiliar sensations. Others, like the Crystalline Collective representatives, seemed fascinated. A few, including some who had supported the Ethereals, looked thoughtful. Interesting, the Arbiter said after a long pause. We have not experienced anything quite like that before. It is intense. That's what makes us human, Grace said. We feel everything intensely. Joy, sorrow, love, anger, all of it. And yes, that can be dangerous, but it's also what drives us to do impossible things, to reach for the stars, to sacrifice everything for the people we care about. The final vote was closer than anyone expected. When the results were announced, humanity had won by just 3 votes. Provisional membership is granted, High Arbiter Quendal declared. The artifact will remain with humanity, but under regular monitoring. Any misuse will result in immediate intervention. As the council session ended and the various representatives began to file out, Veltar approached Grace. "You have won this round, Commander," the Ethereal said, "but emotion is still dangerous. Your species will make mistakes, act irrationally, cause conflicts that logic could have prevented." "You're probably right," Grace admitted. "We will make mistakes. We'll act on impulse sometimes, make decisions based on our hearts rather than our heads. We'll probably cause all kinds of problems you can't even imagine yet." Veltar's perfect features showed confusion. "Then why—" "Because that's not all we'll do," Grace interrupted. "We'll also create beautiful things that pure logic never could. We'll make sacrifices that don't make mathematical sense but are absolutely necessary. We'll form bonds that transcend species barriers and love people we've never met." She gestured toward the viewports, where the human fleet was beginning to disperse, individual ships heading back to their homes and duties. "You see chaos. I see a species that dropped everything to protect strangers because they felt their fear and answered their call for help. You see dangerous unpredictability. I see people who will cross the galaxy for family." Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Finally, it spoke again. Perhaps we will see which of us is correct." "I hope so," Grace replied. "And I hope that when you do, you'll understand that being different doesn't mean being wrong." 6 months later, Commander Grace Callan stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the new human-designed embassy that orbited at the edge of Council space. Through the viewports, she could see ships from dozens of species coming and going, conducting the business of galactic civilization. The artifact, now officially called the Empathy Crystal, rested in a place of honor at the station's heart. Under carefully controlled conditions, it was being used to facilitate communication between species that had never been able to truly understand each other before. The Zephyrians, with their fierce independence, found common ground with human colonists who valued freedom above security. The Crystalline Collective discovered that their mathematical harmony could be enhanced by human creativity and spontaneity. Even some of the more rigid council species were beginning to see the value in what humans brought to the galactic community. "Commander," Dr. Lila Voss approached, carrying a datapad filled with the latest reports. "The cultural exchange program is exceeding all expectations. We've had requests from 17 different species to establish permanent human liaisons." Grace smiled, remembering the fear in Veltar's voice when it had first encountered human emotion. "Any word from the Ethereals?" "Actually, yes," Lila said, her expression growing more serious. "Veltar has requested a private meeting with you. It seems they've been studying our interactions with other species." An hour later, Grace found herself in the station's diplomatic suite, facing the being who had once threatened to quarantine all of humanity. Veltar looked the same as always, perfectly symmetrical features, pale blue skin, those large black eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. But something was different in its posture, less rigid somehow. "Commander Callan," Veltar began, its melodious voice carrying a new undertone. "I have come to reassess certain conclusions." "Oh?" Grace settled into her chair, genuinely curious. "What kind of conclusions?" "For the past 6 months, the Collective has been monitoring human interactions throughout the galaxy," Veltar said. "We expected to document instances of emotional instability, conflicts arising from irrational decision-making, proof that our initial assessment was correct." The Ethereal paused, and for the first time since Grace had known it, Veltar seemed uncertain. "Instead, we observed something unexpected. The mining colony on Kepler 442 was facing extinction due to equipment failures. Logic dictated they should abandon the settlement and relocate to more viable worlds. Instead, 17 different human ships diverted from their planned routes to provide assistance, despite significant cost and inconvenience to themselves." Grace nodded. "The Yamato incident. I heard about that. No one ordered those ships to help. They just did." "Yes," Veltar continued. "When we analyzed the decision-making process, it made no logical sense. The colonists were strangers to most of the ship crews. There was no economic benefit, no strategic advantage, yet they came anyway. Because it was the right thing to do, Grace said simply. But how do you quantify right? Veltar asked, and there was something almost desperate in its voice. How do you make decisions based on concepts that cannot be measured or calculated? Grace leaned forward, studying the alien's face. She could see genuine confusion there, and something else, curiosity. The same way you decide anything, she said. You consider all the factors, weigh the consequences, and then you choose what feels right in your heart. We do not have hearts, Veltar said. Not in the way you mean. No, Grace agreed. But you have something else, don't you? Some part of you that makes choices beyond pure logic. Veltar was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was softer than Grace had ever heard it. There is something. When we evolved beyond emotion, we thought we had achieved perfection. Pure logic, perfect efficiency, no waste or contradiction. But lately, watching your species, it paused. We have begun to wonder if we lost something essential. Grace felt a flutter of excitement. This was the breakthrough she had hoped for, but never expected to see so soon. What kind of something? She asked gently. The ability to care about outcomes beyond logical necessity, Veltar admitted. We make decisions based on efficiency and order, but we do not feel joy when our plans succeed. We do not mourn when they fail. We exist. We function, but we do not truly live. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Veltar, Grace said carefully, are you asking about the possibility of reconnecting with emotion? The ethereal's perfect features showed the slightest tremor. Fear, perhaps, or hope. The collective has been studying the empathy crystal, it said. We believe it might be possible to experience what you experience. Temporarily, of course, just to understand. Grace felt her heart racing. This could change everything, not just for the ethereals, but for the entire galactic community. It's dangerous, she warned. Human emotions are intense. For someone who's never experienced them before. We are aware of the risks, Veltar said, but we must know. For millennia, we have made decisions about other species based on the assumption that logic is superior to emotion, if we are wrong. Then you've been making the wrong decisions, Grace finished. About humanity, about the Vorthak, about everyone who doesn't fit your model of civilization. Veltar nodded slowly. Precisely. The procedure took place 3 days later, under carefully controlled conditions in the station's medical bay. Dr. Voss had worked around the clock to create a neural interface that could safely bridge the gap between ethereal and human consciousness, while Sakura had modified the empathy crystal to provide the gentlest possible introduction to emotional experience. Remember, Grace said as they prepared to begin, emotions can be overwhelming at first. If it becomes too much, just say the word and we'll disconnect immediately. Veltar, lying on the medical table with monitoring devices attached to its translucent skin, nodded. I understand. Begin when ready. The connection was established slowly, carefully. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then Veltar's eyes widened and its perfect composure began to crack. Oh, it whispered, and there was wonder in its voice. Oh, this is... Through the neural link, Grace could feel what Veltar was experiencing. The first taste of emotion after millennia of pure logic. She had shared just the simplest feeling. Contentment, the warm satisfaction of a job well done. But to Veltar, it was a revelation. How do you function with this? The ethereal asked, tears beginning to flow down its pale cheeks. An impossible sight that made everyone in the medical bay stop and stare. It is so intense. That's just the beginning, Grace said gently. Would you like to experience something stronger? Veltar hesitated, then nodded. This time, Grace shared a memory from the day her daughter had been born. The overwhelming rush of love and protectiveness that had filled her when she first held the tiny, perfect life in her arms. Veltar's reaction was immediate and powerful. The being sat up abruptly, its hands pressed to its chest, gasping as if it couldn't breathe. Stop, Dr. Voss said, reaching for the controls. That's too much. No, Veltar said, though its voice was shaking. Don't stop. I need to understand. This feeling, it's like being on fire, but good fire. Fire that doesn't destroy but creates. Is this Is this love? Yes, Grace said softly. That's what it feels like to love someone more than your own life. And you carry this inside you always? Veltar asked in amazement. How do you make rational decisions with such powerful forces affecting your judgment? Sometimes we don't, Grace admitted. Sometimes love makes us do stupid things, dangerous things. But it also makes us do impossible things. It's what drove our species to the stars, what makes us willing to sacrifice everything for our children, our friends, our principles. Veltar was quiet for a moment, processing the experience. Then it looked up at Grace with new understanding in its eyes. Show me anger, it said. Are you sure? Anger can be even more intense than love. I must know, if we are to judge other species fairly, we must understand all aspects of emotion. This time, Grace shared a memory of injustice. The day she had learned that a corrupt official had been selling food meant for refugee children. The pure, righteous fury that had filled her. The need to make things right no matter the cost. Veltar's reaction was immediate and violent. The being shot to its feet, its hands clenched into fists, its perfect features twisted with an expression it had never worn before. Those who harm the innocent must be stopped, it said, its voice carrying a new edge. They must face consequences for their actions. This is justice, yes? This burning need to protect those who cannot protect themselves? Yes, Grace said, watching in fascination as the ethereal experienced its first taste of moral outrage. That's what drives us to fight against injustice, even when it's dangerous or costly. And revenge? Veltar asked, the word coming out like a curse. The emotion you humans feel when those you love are threatened. Grace hesitated. Revenge was perhaps the most dangerous of human emotions, the one that had caused the most problems throughout their history. Are you sure you want to experience that? I must, Veltar said firmly. It is what my people fear most about yours. I need to understand it completely. Grace reached deep into her memory, to the day she had learned about the ethereal threat to human colonies. The cold, calculating fury that had filled her, not the hot anger of injustice, but something deeper and more dangerous. The absolute determination to protect her people, no matter what it took. Veltar's reaction was immediate and terrifying. The being's eyes went completely black, its perfect features hardening into something that looked almost predatory. They threatened your young, it said, and its voice was completely different, deeper, more primal. They would have caged your people like animals. This cannot be allowed. They must pay for this threat. Veltar, Dr. Voss said nervously, your neural activity is spiking dangerously. We should disconnect. No, the ethereal said, and there was steel in its voice. I understand now. This is not mindless violence. This is protection taken to its logical extreme. When everything you love is threatened, when reason and diplomacy have failed, this is what remains. It turned to Grace, and she saw something in its eyes that she had never expected to see in an ethereal, complete understanding. We were wrong, Veltar said simply, about everything. Emotion is not chaos. It is the foundation of meaning. Without it, existence is just existence. Function without purpose, logic without wisdom. The neural link was carefully disconnected, and Veltar sat in silence for several minutes, processing what it had experienced. When it finally spoke again, its voice carried a new weight. I must return to the collective immediately, it said. They must experience this for themselves. Our entire civilization needs to understand what we have lost. What will you tell them? Grace asked. Veltar stood, and for the first time since she had known it, the being moved with something other than perfect mechanical precision. There was emotion in its movements now, determination, hope, and yes, even a trace of that protective fury it had just experienced. I will tell them that we have been fools, it said. That in our pursuit of perfection, we achieved only emptiness. That the species we sought to control and contain are not our inferiors, but our teachers. It paused at the door, looking back at Grace with something like gratitude in its eyes. And I will tell them that it is time for the ethereal collective to remember how to feel. 3 months later, the first ethereal delegation arrived at Unity Station, not as conquerors or judges, but as students. They came seeking to understand what they had lost, to learn how to balance logic with emotion, efficiency with meaning. The transformation wasn't easy or quick. Millennia of emotional suppression couldn't be undone overnight. But gradually, the ethereals began to change. They started making decisions based not just on logic, but on what felt right. They began to care about outcomes beyond mere efficiency. And as they changed, so did the entire Galactic Council. Species that had been marginalized for being too emotional suddenly found themselves welcomed as equals. The rigid hierarchy that had governed galactic civilization for millennia began to give way to something more flexible, more inclusive. Commander Grace Callan, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's primary representative to the Council, stood once again at the viewport of Unity Station. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Veltar, no longer the cold, perfect being she had first encountered, but something more complex, an individual learning to balance logic with feeling, efficiency with compassion.